for my very first bad week, well, it's not my very first bad week. I've had plenty of those. But for my first one with the Europeans, the obvious frontrunners in this crowded field of losers are the European stock markets, which frankly are having a very rough time. And can you guess the reason, Dominic?
Is it the orange man in the White House?
Yes, indeed. Donald Trump has slapped tariffs of at least 10% on almost every single product coming into the United States in what he has proudly touted as America's Liberation Day. But Europeans certainly feel far from liberated. Stuff that's being exported by European companies has been hit with a higher rate of 20% for being among what Trump calls the worst offenders. I believe he also called us pathetic. Ouch.
Yeah, that hurts.
His message to foreign companies is simple. Buy or make your stuff in America or face much higher costs. And the stock markets across Europe are reacting about as well as you'd expect. Very badly indeed, plunging left, right, and center. And of course, we've been waiting with bated breath for the EU to decide whether and how to hit back. Will there be retaliatory tariffs, sanctions, a strongly worded letter perhaps? So, European trade ministers this week were meeting in Luxembourg to debate precisely what actions to take. And at that meeting, the EU's Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič warned that the EU was prepared to use every tool in its trade defense arsenal to protect the single market. His words, not mine. Unfortunately for us, we're recording this on Tuesday evening, and the vote on which tools exactly would be used was taking place after we recorded this show. So bad week for me too. So I've had to find another way of exploring the European fallout from what some have termed Trump's tariff tantrums.
Ooh, what have you gone for?
Ooh, lo and behold, one victim of these punitive taxes appears to be none other than Tesla, the electric car brand owned by Trump's chainsaw-wielding wingman Elon Musk.
Oh, that's a fun angle and not what I expected. I guess it's kind of ironic that Musk specifically is having a bad time as a result of these tariffs, given that he's positioned himself as like Bezzy mates with Trump, at least up until now.
Indeed, it's not been a good week for Musk. So buckle up, Dominic, for this bumpy race across Tesla territory and Tariff Town.
Ooh,
yes, I like a good pun. I don't know if they're good, but I like a pun. Anyway, so something you might have missed in the midst of all this talk of tariffs and trade wars is that Tesla sales have been plunging in Europe. They're actually way down in several countries for the first quarter of the year, where they usually do pretty well. France, Sweden, Denmark, and your home away from home, the Netherlands, where sales plummeted 61%.
Whoa.
In Germany, sales of Teslas are also down a whopping 43% compared to the same time last year. Their sales are doing okay in some other European countries like Norway and Spain, but overall their numbers are looking pretty weak. Competitors, meanwhile, on the other hand, are doing rather well.
Oh.
Overall, yes, this is surprising, but overall sales in the electric vehicle industry are up more than 35% year on year. Although I think this is the first time I'm actually reporting on the electric vehicle industry, so feels quite important.
Wow. Well, thank you for breaking your electric car reporting virginity here on the Europeans podcast.
I'm delighted. It didn't even hurt. Okay, anyway, competitors. I think it's safe to say this is not because people don't want to buy electric cars at the moment. This is specifically a Tesla thing.
Well, thank you for bringing us up to speed. You said you loved puns, so I've got another one for you here. What's the driving force behind Tesla's sudden misfortunes?
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you for catering to my fantastic passion. So one factor is that there have actually been fewer Teslas being made in Europe recently. So that's part of it. As you may or may not know, there's this massive Tesla factory just outside Berlin where they build the Tesla Model Y, the best-selling electric car in the world. And Tesla had to partially shut down the plant for several weeks at the start of the year to do some upgrade work for this particular car. And so therefore, output was inevitably hit as a result of this. But we also have other factors. Teslas are expensive. There's been rising competition from cheaper Chinese brands. And in Tesla's biggest European market, Germany, the government has stopped offering subsidies to people who buy electric vehicles. So that hurts. But this isn't just about money. This is also about Musk specifically. If we stay in Germany for a minute, he's not exactly Mr. Popular there these days, especially not after backing the far-right AfD party ahead of elections in February, as you might well recall. Mm-hmm. And his interference in domestic politics has sparked a pretty serious backlash in recent weeks. There have been protests and even acts of vandalism. Some German activists actually set fire to several Tesla cars last month. Tesla drivers, meanwhile, have started to sell off their cars or slap bumper stickers on their vehicles that read, "I bought this car before Elon went crazy," possibly also to protect themselves from future arson attacks, I think. Obviously, these protests are not limited to Germany. We've seen them spread worldwide. But they are definitely a sign that Musk is facing growing resistance in Europe.
I've seen quite a lot of people online also referring to Teslas as swastikas, which is kind of cutting, but yeah, I understand where it comes from. But what has tariffs got to do with all of this?
Ah, yes. Thanks for bringing me back on the right track, Dominic.
My pleasure.
There are several reasons why the tariffs are bad for Tesla. For one, Tesla cars made in the US are built with parts imported from many different countries. Batteries from China or Japan, electronics from Taiwan, and so on. And while, obviously, we talked about Germany, but it's evident that this is also a global issue for Tesla. And so Trump's tariffs have disrupted these global supply chains because they increase costs and they slow production, obviously. Now, some analysts are saying that Musk may be more protected than others from the fallout because of his closeness to Trump. But as I'll explain in a second, it's actually not that straightforward. Another big issue is that the tariffs have sparked chaos in the global stock markets, the very reason we are doing this segment. Mm-hmm. And this has wiped $11 billion from Musk's net worth, which he obviously won't appreciate.
So, I mean, obviously it's so awful for so many billions of people what is happening to the global economy right now. But I do like that we're just here on the podcast focusing on the losses of one particular man.
And you can just see how people will probably tie this to the fact that I've grown up in Luxembourg. So therefore, I am all about protecting the rich and, pulling out my handkerchief.
Well, or the opposite. I feel like this is a kind of celebration of Schadenfreude, if anything.
Also, I'm a poor Luxembourger, so don't get me wrong. I don't have any offshore accounts or, have any sort of secret, fortune stashed away.
Thank you for clarifying.
Just want to clarify this on the record. But yeah, and the other thing is also more generally the unpredictability over what's going to happen, what Trump will do next, how countries might retaliate, is creating loads of uncertainty for a company like Tesla, an American brand that produces all over the world with parts that come from all over the world.
So Europe is a part of the world which up until now has bought a fair amount of Teslas, but it's also a part of the world that is home to a lot of massive car companies like Volkswagen and BMW. So presumably this has also been a really, really bad week for them too, not just for this US-based company, Tesla.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Trump actually wants to charge more on European car imports than on general goods that are being exported to the US, 25% as opposed to 20%. So this is an industry that is definitely feeling the pain even more than others. And obviously, if the US adds a 25% tariff on German cars, think of big brands like VW or Audi, that means that every German-made car sold in America suddenly costs a lot more money compared to the ones made in the US. And the US is a huge deal for EU car makers. It's their second biggest market after the UK in terms of the number of cars they sell every year, and their number one market in terms of the money they actually make there. So yeah, Trump slapping a 25% tariff on European cars and car parts is a massive problem. Unsurprisingly, on the other hand, American car workers have obviously been celebrating the tariff. But, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Some European car companies might dodge the worst of it. Take Renault, for example. They don't sell cars in the US, so they're likely to be less impacted by it. But German giants like BMW, Volkswagen, and Mercedes, they do loads of business across the Atlantic, which leaves them a lot more exposed. Still, it's early days, and trying to predict how this will all play out is really tricky, especially for me, who's not a specialist in the field.
There's some suggestion that Trump is doing this not just to European companies, but to companies everywhere, because it's something he can use as a bargaining chip, right?
Right. If you've ever watched an episode of The Apprentice, you'll know that there are few things that Trump likes more than negotiating. He was a real estate mogul after all, and that's precisely what he can do now, except on a much bigger stage. He can use it to make a bunch of different deals with a bunch of different countries.
And what do you think he might be trying to get out of a deal with Europe specifically?
That answer is easy. Trump basically wants the EU to stop telling America's tech giants what to do. Trump doesn't just dislike EU tech rules, he sees them as a straight-up attack on American power. To him, these big EU fines and strict regulations are just another way of punishing big businesses like Google and Apple. So, in other words, Trump thinks EU policy is unfair, anti-American, and just another reason to push back.
Was that a hint of a Trump impression I heard there?
Oh, that was awful. I don't know. It's a hint of an American accent, but obviously I'm terrible at them. It sounds sometimes Irish when I try and speak American. I don't know.
I enjoyed it anyway.
I think you've got a lot of US listeners, so apologies. Sorry.
I don't know whether I should actually ask this or whether it's appropriate to ask it, but are there any winners in all of this mess?
I don't know about winners. I mean, the choices for European companies to avoid a major crash are really limited. Take a hit on their profits, bump up prices for American buyers, or start building more cars directly in the US, I guess. But interestingly, Germany's outgoing economy minister, Robert Habeck, thinks that Tesla's collapsing sales might actually be good news for local car makers who could potentially, if they can afford to and if they have the capacity, ramp up their production and fill that gap.
Ah, yes, Tesla. I'm glad we got back there, back to where we started. So what are Musk's options now? Could he just nudge his buddy Trump and call in some favors so that Tesla gets a better deal?
Well, you'll never guess what. As a matter of fact, Musk has apparently tried to get Trump to change his mind recently.
Oh.
According to the Washington Post, Musk personally reached out to the president last weekend and pleaded with him to drop the tariffs which are hurting his business. Elon basically wants a zero tariff situation. He said this on the record, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America. So pretty much the very opposite of what his boss is doing. But also, guess what? Ego versus ego, Trump didn't budge. In fact, he went the other way and threatened to slap an extra 50% tariff on imports from China this week, on top of the 34% he'd already announced. So more arm wrestling, more strongman posture, basically. Musk then did what Musk always does after Trump's rebuke. He took to X to throw some shade, this time at Trump's economic advisor, Peter Navarro, the driving force behind a lot of this push for tariffs. But Navarro, also a big ego, wouldn't have any of it. He told Fox News, "We understand what's going on here. Elon sells cars. He's simply protecting his own interests." Coming to think of it, that's what we're all trying to do here, I guess, protecting our own interests. Except that as Europeans, I'd like to think that we believe in the power of working together rather than closing our borders, markets, and hearts. And this brings us to the end of this very long road trip. Thank you for bearing with me and not throwing up on the back seat.
Well, thank you so much for steering us through this traffic jam of tariffs and cars and trade war. I am so pleased you decided to take on this mammoth topic.
By the way, I feel like I've plugged a lot of car companies today, so I don't know how I feel about this ethically. I've given big brands a lot of exposure, so apologies to listeners who are not happy about this.
It's fine. You made it clear there were many different options available, and you were mainly talking about electric vehicles, which is better than others, I guess.
I guess.